color revolution or color revolution is a term that was widely used by worldwide media to describe various related movements that developed in several societies in the former Soviet Union and the Balkans during the early 2000s. The term has also been applied to a number of revolutions elsewhere, including in the Middle East. Some observers have called the events a revolutionary wave, the origins of which can be traced back to the 1986 People Power Revolution in the Philippines. Participants in the color revolutions have mostly used non-violent resistance, also called civil resistance. Such methods as demonstrations, strikes and interventions have been intended protests against governments seen as corrupt or authoritarian, and to advocate democracy, and they have also created strong pressure for change. These movements generally adopted a specific color or flower as their symbol. The color revolutions are notable for the important role of non-governmental organizations and particularly student activists in organizing creative nonviolent resistance. Such movements have had a measure of success, as for example in the former Yugoslavia's Bulldozer Revolution, in Georgia's Rose Revolution, and in Ukraine's Orange Revolution. In most but not all cases, massive street protests followed disputed elections, or requests for fair elections, and led to the resignation or overthrow of leaders considered by their opponents to be authoritarian. Some events have been called color revolutions, but are different from the above cases in certain basic characteristics. Examples include Lebanon's Cedar Revolution, and Kuwait's Blue Revolution. Government figures in Russia, such as Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, have stated that color revolutions are a new form of warfare. President Putin said that Russia must prevent color revolutions. We see what tragic consequences the wave of so-called color revolutions led to. For us this is a lesson and a warning. We should do everything necessary so that nothing similar ever happens in Russia. List of color revolutions. Influencing factors. Anti-communist revolutions. Many have cited the influence of the series of revolutions which occurred in Central and Eastern Europe in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Particularly the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia in 1989. Yet the roots of the pacifist floral imagery may go even further back to the non-violent Carnation Revolution of Portugal in the mid-1970s, which is associated with the color carnation because carnations were worn, and the 1986 Yellow Revolution in the Philippines where demonstrators offered peace flowers to military personnel manning armored tanks. Student movements. The first of these was Otpor, in Serbia, which was founded at Belgrade University in October 1998 and began protesting against Milosevic during the Kosovo War. Most of them were already veterans of anti-Milosevic demonstrations such as the 1996-97 protests and the 9th of March 1991 protest. Many of its members were arrested or beaten by the police. Despite this, during the presidential campaign in September 2000, Otpor launched its Gotovja campaign that galvanized Serbian discontent with Milosevic, and resulted in his defeat. Members of Otpor have inspired and trained members of related student movements including Kamara in Georgia, Pora in Ukraine, ZUBR in Belarus and MJAFD in Albania. These groups have been explicit and scrupulous in their practice of nonviolent resistance as advocated and explained in Gene Sharp's writings. The massive protests that they have organized, which were essential to the successes in Serbia, Georgia and Ukraine, have been notable for their colorfulness and use of ridiculing humor in opposing authoritarian leaders. Critical analysis. Russian assessment. According to Anthony Kordsman of the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Russian military leaders view the color revolutions as a new US and European approach to warfare that focuses on creating destabilizing revolutions in other states as a means of serving their security interests at low cost and with minimal casualties. Reactions and connected movements in other countries. Armenia. Aram Karapetyan, leader of the New Times political party in Armenia, has declared his intention to start a revolution from below in April 2005, saying that the situation was different now that people had seen the developments in the CIS. He added that the Armenian revolution will be peaceful but not have a color. Azerbaijan. A number of movements were created in Azerbaijan in mid-2005, inspired by the examples of both Georgia and Ukraine. A youth group, calling itself YOX, declared its opposition to governmental corruption. The leader of YOX said that unlike Pora or Kamara, he wants to change not just the leadership, but the entire system of governance in Azerbaijan. The YOX movement chose green as its color. The spearhead of Azerbaijan's attempted color revolution was Yeni Fekir, a youth group closely aligned with the Azad Lig bloc of opposition political parties, along with groups such as Magam and Dalga. Yeni Fekir deliberately adopted many of the tactics of the Georgian and Ukrainian color revolution groups, even borrowing the color orange from the Ukrainian revolution. In November 2005, protesters took to the streets, waving orange flags and banners, to protest what they considered government fraud in recent parliamentary elections. The Azerbaijani color revolution finally fizzled out with the police riot on the 26th of November, during which dozens of protesters were injured and perhaps hundreds tear-gassed and sprayed with water cannons. Belarus. In Belarus, there have been a number of protests against President Alexander Lukashenko, with participation from student group ZUBR. One round of protests culminated on the 25th of March 2005. It was a self-declared attempt to emulate the Kyrgyzstan revolution, and involved over 1,000 citizens. However, police severely suppressed it, arresting over 30 people, and imprisoning opposition leader Mikhail Marinuk. A second, much larger, round of protests began almost a year later, on the 19th of March 2006, soon after the presidential election. Official results had Lukashenko winning with 83% of the vote. Protesters claimed the results were achieved through fraud and voter intimidation, a charge echoed by many foreign governments. Protesters camped out in October Square in Minsk over the next week, calling variously for the resignation of Lukashenko, the installation of rival candidate Alexander Milinkievich, and new, fair elections. The opposition originally used as a symbol the white-red-white former flag of Belarus. The movement has had significant connections with that in neighboring Ukraine, and during the Orange Revolution some white-red-white flags were seen being waved in Kiev. During the 2006 protests, some called it the Jeans Revolution, or Denim Revolution, blue jeans being considered a symbol for freedom. Some protesters cut up jeans into ribbons and hung them in public places. It is claimed that ZUBR was responsible for coining the phrase. Lukashenko has said in the past, "In our country, there will be no pink or orange, or even banana revolution." More recently he's said the West, think that Belarus is ready for some orange or, what is a rather frightening option, blue or cornflower blue revolution. Such blue revolutions are the last thing we need. On the 19th of April 2005, he further commented, "All these colored revolutions are pure and simple banditry." Burma. In Burma, a series of anti-government protests were referred to in the press as the Saffron Revolution after Buddhist monks took the vanguard of the protests. A previous, student-led revolution, the 8888 uprising on the 8th of August 1988, had similarities to the color revolutions, but was violently repressed. China. A call which first appeared on the 17th of February 2011 on the Chinese-language site Boxin.com in the United States for a Jasmine Revolution in the People's Republic of China and repeated on social networking sites in China resulted in blocking of internet searches for Jasmine, and a heavy Police presence at designated sites for protests such as the McDonald's in central Beijing, one of the 13 designated protest sites, on the 20th of February 2011. A crowd did gather there, but their motivations were ambiguous as a crowd tends to draw a crowd in that area. Boxon experienced a denial of service attack during this period and was inaccessible. Moldova. The opposition is reported to have hoped for and urged some kind of orange revolution, similar to that in Ukraine, in the follow-up of the Moldovan parliamentary elections, 2005, while the Christian Democratic People's Party adopted orange for its color in a clear reference to the events of Ukraine. A name hypothesized for such an event was Grape Revolution, because of the abundance of vineyards in the country. However, such a revolution failed to materialize after the governmental victory in the elections. Many reasons have been given for this, including a fractured opposition and the fact that the government had already co-opted many of the political positions that might have united the opposition. Also, the elections themselves were declared fairer in the OSCE election monitoring reports than had been the case in other countries where similar revolutions occurred. Even though the CIS monitoring mission strongly condemned them, there was civil unrest all over Moldova following the 2009 parliamentary election due to the opposition claiming that the communists had fixed the election. Eventually, the Alliance for European Integration created a governing coalition that pushed the Communist Party into opposition. Mongolia. On the 25th of March 2005, activists wearing yellow scarves held protests in the capital city of Ulaanbaatar, disputing the results of the 2004 Mongolian parliamentary elections and calling for fresh elections. One of the chants heard in that protest was, "Let's congratulate our Kyrgyz brothers for their revolutionary spirit. Let's free Mongolia of corruption." An uprising commenced in Ulaanbaatar on the 1st of July 2008, with a peaceful meeting in protest of the election of the 29th of June. The results of these elections were corrupted by the Mongolian People's Party. Approximately 30,000 people took part in the meeting. Afterwards, some of the protesters left the central square and moved to the HQ of the Mongolian People's Revolutionary Party, which they attacked and then burned down. A police station was also attacked. By the night, rioters vandalized and then set fire to the Cultural Palace. Cars torching, bank robberies and looting were reported. The organizations in the burning buildings were vandalized and looted. Police used tear gas, rubber bullets and water cannon against stone-throwing protesters. A 4-day state of emergency was installed. The capital has been placed under a 2,200 to 0800 curfew, and alcohol sales banned. Rioting not resumed. 5 people were shot dead by the police. Dozens of teenagers were wounded from the police firearms and disabled, and 800 people, including the leaders of the civil movements J. Bat Zandan, Magne and B. Jargalsakan, were arrested. International observers said the 1st of July general election was free and fair. Pakistan. In 2007, the lawyers' movement started in Pakistan with the aim of restoration of deposed judges. However, within a month, the movement took a turn and started working towards the goal of removing Pervez Musharraf from power. Russia. The liberal opposition in Russia is represented by several parties and movements. An active part of the opposition is the Oborona youth movement. Oborona claims that its aim is to provide free and honest elections and to establish in Russia a system with democratic political competition. This movement under leadership of Oleg Kozlovsky is one of the most active and radical ones and is represented in a number of Russian cities. The movement contributed with its activities recently during the elections of the 8th of September 2013 to the success of Navalny in Moscow and other opposition candidates in various regions and towns of Russia. The Oboronkish also took part with other oppositional groups in protests against fraud in the Moscow mayoral elections. Since 2012, protester was Alexei Navalny. who mobilized with support of the various and fractured oppositional parties and groups masses of young people against alleged repression and fraud of the Kremlin apparatus. After a strong campaign for the 8th of September elections in Moscow and many regions, the opposition had won remarkable successes. So Navalny reached in Moscow a second place with surprising 27% behind Kremlin-backed Sergei Sobyanin with 51%. In other regions, opposition's candidates received remarkable successes. So in the big industrial town Yekaterinburg in 2013, opposition candidate Yevgeny Roizman received the majority of votes and became the mayor of that town. The slow but gradual sequence of opposition successes reached by mass protests, election campaigns and other peaceful strategies has been recently called by observers and analysts as of Radio Free Europe tortoise revolution, in contrast to the radical rose or orange ones the Kremlin tried to prevent. The opposition in the Republic of Bashkortostan has held protests demanding that the federal authorities intervene to dismiss Murtaza Rakhimov from his position as president of the republic, accusing him of leading an arbitrary, corrupt, and violent regime. Arit Ilmakhamatov, one of the opposition leaders, and leader of the Bashkir National Front, has said that the opposition movement has been inspired from the mass protests of Ukraine and Kyrgyzstan. Another opposition leader, Marat Kyrylein, has said that if an orange revolution were to happen in Russia, it would begin in Bashkortostan, Uzbekistan. In Uzbekistan, there has been long-standing opposition to President Islam Karimov from liberals and Islamists. Following protests in 2005, security forces in Uzbekistan carried out the Andijan massacre that successfully halted countrywide demonstrations. These protests otherwise could have turned into color revolution, according to many analysts. The revolution in neighboring Kyrgyzstan began in the largely ethnic Uzbek south, and received early support in the city of Osh. Nigara Hidoyatova, leader of the Free Peasants Opposition Party, has referred to the idea of a peasant revolt or cotton revolution. She also said that her party is collaborating with the youth organization Shidit, and that she hopes it can evolve to an organization similar to Kamara or Pora. Other nascent youth organizations in and for Uzbekistan include Bulgar and the Free Uzbek Group. Uzbekistan has also had an active Islamist movement, led by the Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan, most notable for the 1999 Tashkent bombings, though the group was largely destroyed following the 2001 NATO invasion of Afghanistan. Response in other countries. When groups of young people protested the closure of Venezuela's RCTV television station in June 2007, President Hugo Chavez said that he believed the protests were organized by the West in an attempt to promote a soft coup, like the revolutions in Ukraine and Georgia. Similarly, Chinese authorities claimed repeatedly in the state-run media that the 2014 Hong Kong protests, known as the Umbrella Revolution, was organized and controlled by the United States. In July 2007, Iranian state television released footage of two Iranian-American prisoners, both of whom work for Western NGOs. As part of a documentary called In the Name of Democracy, the documentary purportedly discusses the color revolutions in Ukraine and Georgia and accuses the United States of attempting to foment a similar ouster in Iran. Other examples of color revolutions and political movements around the world. The imagery of a color revolution has been adopted by various non-revolutionary electoral campaigns. The Purple Revolution social media campaign of Nahid Nenshi catapulted his platform from 8% to become Calgary's 36th mayor. The platform advocated city sustainability and to inspire the high voter turnout of 56%, particularly among young voters. In 2015, the NDP of Alberta earned a majority mandate and ended the 44-year-old dynasty of the Progressive Conservatives. During the campaign, Rachel Notley's popularity gained momentum, and the News and NDP supporters referred to this phenomenon as the Orange Crush, for the party's color. NDP parodies of orange-flavored Crush soda logo became a popular meme on social media.